So today we're going back to basics. We're talking about garden design. Over the last couple of months I've done quite a few videos on some of the more technical and detailed elements within garden design, but today we're looking at how do we even start to design a garden. Well, in 10 minutes time you're going to know exactly that. So here we go. Okay, so in order to design any garden, the first thing we need to establish is what do we want to achieve from the garden. This is often known in professional terms as the client brief or the design brief, but even if you're doing this for yourself, it's still worth understanding exactly what you want to get from the garden before you get started. So for example, we need to look at questions of how many people live within the house, how do they use the garden? Are they thinking about entertaining, or is it more of a lounging, relaxing kind of garden? So when I first started out as a garden designer, I used to have a list of questions that I used to ask. Now I tend to let the conversation flow and I know roughly what I need to achieve from that conversation. But however we do it, we just need to get a list of maybe 8 to 10 bullet points before we start to put pen to paper. Next, we need to know what we're working with. The site survey and site analysis. Now, the most basic way of explaining this is it's really about what is your canvas, what is the shape of the garden, how does the garden sit, whether there are any key elements within the garden that we can't change or move, such as levels. I've done a video already specifically on site surveys. Link is above now if you need a bit more help with this. Now, as a professional, you might want to employ a professional survey company. Myself, I like to try and survey all the gardens if I can. Sometimes I do get a little bit of help from a professional service. However, by doing the survey myself, I really get to understand the garden. And this is where it starts to change into the site analysis. So I'm thinking about, can I hear the road from the garden? Are the neighbours overlooking what's going on in and around the garden? We're getting this all down on paper because we're going to need this when we start to come up with those initial ideas. So once we know what the client or what ourselves we want to achieve from the garden and we know what we're working from, it's all about the big idea. And it's time to get creative and start sketching for the initial concept. This is where we really want to get, as I say, the big idea. We want to be thinking about the structure of the garden, where the patios are going to go or the seating areas. What do we want to achieve within the garden? What do we want to include, whether it be water features? Do we want to start thinking about trees, that sort of element? It's really the structure of the garden and getting that basic idea down on paper. Now, what we're not doing is going into the absolute nitty-gritty of how many steps there are leading down from one section of the garden to the other, or whether or not there's a certain variety of tree that we want to include. It's really a little bit more rudimental than that, and we're just trying to get that initial layout set up and sorted. Now, one of the best things about doing this is we can make sure that we're on the same lines as our client. Now, if you're doing it for yourself, maybe it's your partner that you need to make sure that you're communicating this to so that they're involved and they are happy with what you're doing as well. Maybe not, maybe you make all the decisions. But by getting this initial layout down in its most basic form, we can really formulate those initial ideas. So this is a concept I did recently for a garden we're building in the new year. As you can see, I've got some more basic details and highlighted various elements, but I don't have things like step heights or levels for that matter. There's no planting plan at this stage. I just want to get the ideas over to see if my client likes what I'm suggesting. Or if you're designing it for yourself, that you have a broad brush plan. This is the initial concept. Then, once we've got this basic idea down, we can start developing it and putting in the detail. You might want to go back and check the survey, go through the brief, just make sure, double check you've got everything all in order. Personally, I like to revisit the garden and actually walk through the design within the garden, perhaps go and stand in the garden, roughly where I think that second patio might be, and look at what can I see, what can see me, and really understand it and see if we need to change anything. Might need to take a few more levels. If you've done the survey yourself, personally I take a number of levels, but actually then I go back after I've done that initial concept and I double check all the levels in the key areas where it matters most. This is what I'm talking about. This is an outline master plan I did recently. I've got both a two-dimensional plan with measurements and levels and a 3D model, so we can see what it might look like from the kitchen or the back of the garden. I also draw up a draft specification at this stage, and this is where I'm suggesting a lot of the materials that we're going to be using within the garden. I will then follow that up with an email and perhaps some suggestions so that the client can get involved as well. It might be that I'm offering them 3 or 4 different types of paving or decking. Don't necessarily want to just send them to a website because clearly there's hundreds of options there a lot of the time. And actually I've got a good idea of what materials are going to work best. Then once I've got that outline master plan and draft specification ready, I also think it's a good idea to work out what this is going to cost. As part of the client brief, you may well have talked about cost, or you should have talked about cost, and certainly if you're doing it for yourself, you need to know what your budget is. At this stage, you can then start refining that down. It might be that you need a friendly landscaper who can give you some idea of what the costs are going to be like, or you might use some software online, something like Garden Costs, I know is one out there, where you can put in some rough ideas of sizes and the materials that you want to use, and that will come back with what it should roughly cost you, so that you can make sure that A, you're not wasting your time or designing something that's far too detailed and costly for the budget, but equally that you're maximizing what you're doing. So once we're happy with that, or the client's happy with that, and we know it's within their budget, we're on to the final furlong, which is the final design pack. Now, the final design pack can be a mixture of documents, and it's going to depend a certain amount on your design as to what that's going to include. However, the basics that I would suggest must be in any final design pack is, first of all, that final presentation plan. This is really about the client, okay? This is about showing them how you've designed the garden, bit more detail. We use photorealistic visuals so that they can get a real feel for how the garden's going to look. We put on some key measurements, not all over the drawing, but maybe just the depth of the patio or the size of the pathway, just so we can communicate this to the client. And we might then as well also highlight some of the key plants or trees, maybe some of the features that we've put within that. The idea here is to present your design to the client. Next, we're looking at the construction layout plan. This is very much about the landscape. So we've got the presentation plan, which is all about the client or ourselves understanding what we've designed. Next is the construction layout plan. This is the nuts and bolts of how that garden is made up. We need to put lots of measurements on here. Sizes of patio, whether or not we're working to the size of the slab, the width of the pathway, whether or not certain elements within the garden line up. We've got to put levels on there as well, you know, height of the patio, height of the ground, the different step heights. We would also refer to construction details if there's anything like steps or water features, so that the landscape or the contractor, whoever's looking at this design, knows to refer to some of the other documents. Now, I will say that the reason we put key measurements on is, although the plans should be to scale at this point, whether it be 1:50 or whatever it is, you can't rely on a landscaper to start getting the ruler out and start measuring everything when they're on site. Apart from anything, that design, unless you have it laminated, might get smudged, it might get bits of mud on there, you know, it might get torn, damaged. Their ruler might not be in particularly good condition. It takes away that risk of confusion more than anything if we've got key measurements for everything. And also it makes the landscape's life a lot easier if they can just look at the patio and see, right, okay, it's 3.6 meters by 7 meters or whatever it is. And it's a good document to refer to. This is an example of a construction layout plan that I've done fairly recently. As you can see, lots of details in there, levels, measurements. You'll notice with the levels that I've put a level at the start of the patio and a level at the end of the patio. I think we have to be very careful as garden designers that we include elements such as falls. Now, if you are doing this for yourself and perhaps don't have that much experience, don't worry too much. Just put down what you need. Talk to a landscaper about it. What other information might they need? If you can get that right landscaper who can look at that document, they can give you a whole list of things that they might need from that. We do get plans from homeowners and from junior garden designers who perhaps haven't got very much information. We generally go back to them with a list of stuff that we need. So don't be shy of asking for more information. Planting plans are next on the agenda. Again, I've done a video specific to this, so link above there if you need some more help with that, or you're just interested in planting plans. Very basics, we need to highlight what plants are going where. Again, you're designing a garden for yourself, you still need to think carefully about what plants are going to be suited, whether it be the soil, the aspect, you know, how much wind there is, how much space there is. You don't necessarily have to lay them out all individually where they go. It might just be a list of plants for each flower bed, but as long as it's carefully thought through. After that, we really are getting into the territory of it being dependent on what you're including within the garden. Construction details are really important. So for instance, if you're going to have a set of steps, you need to draw that set of steps and exactly how it's going to be built. You might need a bit of help from a landscaper with this, but very basics, we need to put in the heights of the steps, how wide they are, what the detailing is, for instance with the nose and the riser, how you want that to look. And if you can, we really also need to show how they're built so that your client is going to get exactly what you intend, and not suddenly find that the landscape has gone off piste and decided to build it in a completely different way to what you were expecting. Other plans that you might choose to include, for instance, might be a electrical and lighting layout document. You might want a maintenance plan. You certainly need a final specification. I would recommend Heather's specification to anybody who is doing this on a professional basis. This is available online, certainly through the Society of Garden Designers. But we really need to establish exactly what materials are being used and how some of these materials are being used. Again, Heather's specification will list all of this for you, but if you are doing this for yourself, you might want to get some help on this. Or you might want to keep it very, very basic and make sure you've got a landscaper that you trust who can work on this for you. Now you might think to yourself, you know what, I'm doing this for myself. I don't need all those documents or all that information. I would argue, yes, you do. Apart from anything, this helps you refine your ideas. This helps you to take what is a ballpark idea into a realistically achievable garden design. I've had it before where I start off designing a garden and I think I've got it nailed because I've got that initial concept that looks great. But through this process of all the different stages, I've actually ended up refining it and ended up with quite a different garden, which is so much better. And it also avoids that time that the landscaper is going to be having to allow for when it comes to working on site and thinking about, well, how many steps do I need, or how's this going to work? So you're effectively saving yourself money as well. So there we go, garden design in 5 simple stages. We've got the client brief, we've got the site survey and site analysis, we've got the initial concept, the outline plans, and then the final design pack. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please do give us a like. Always great to see. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, I will be back in a couple of weeks with another video. Hope you can all get out in the garden in the meantime. Till then, thanks for watching.